This is a guide's analysis of the avalanche accident in Lake Tahoe from February 17th, 2026. Hi, I'm Jeff Banks. I'm an internationally certified mountain guide for the last 20 plus years. I've worked around the world teaching avalanche safety to U.S. Special Forces, mountain guides, and people just like you. And also the founder of AspectAvy, the first avalanche safety app designed to keep you out of avalanches. I'm also an avalanche survivor myself, and I've lost 15 friends and colleagues to avalanches. And losing people to avalanches in the prime of their life doesn't get any easier. And it's something I'm all too familiar with, and sending loving kindness to the families and friends of the victims. Our deepest empathy for your loss. In this case study, we're going to discuss what you can learn from this tragedy and how it can help keep you safe in the future and hopefully save lives going forward. Here's what we know about the accident from the Sierra Avalanche Center, and we'll include the link so you can click on that. 12 people were fully buried out of a group of 15. 3 were rescued alive, 9 were killed. The avalanche was on a northwest facing slope, and we'll bring it up here in the imagery. It was a D2.5 on the destructive scale. A D2 means it could kill or injure a human. A D3 means it could wipe out a wood-framed house. So it was mid-sized in those range brackets. And it ran about 400 vertical feet from Perry's Point down into the forest. The background conditions, when we have unusual weather patterns, we get unusual avalanches. In this case, it's been a terrible winter throughout the US, throughout the West Coast. And so that means we have a lot of sugary crystals, a lot of weak, unsupportive snow, and then it got shock loaded with a huge, massive load in a big storm. Somewhere between 3 to 8 feet of snow fell in the area and in a very short time frame. So if you could picture the sugary wheat crystals like dominoes, and those were found, according to the avalanche forecast for that day, the facet layer, those are the sugary crystals, exists on northwest through north and northeast aspects, on the shady ones, in mostly wind-protected terrain above 7,500 feet. And that's the bullseye for the problem type there. So if you think of different avalanche problem types as animals, if you're looking at, say, loose snow avalanches, those are relatively innocuous. That's like a coyote. Whereas if you're dealing with an old snow problem, that's like a mountain lion. So it's really important to avoid where the mountain lion lives. And in this case, the slope that cut loose was exactly where the mountain lion lives. That old snow problem is really unpredictable and can be triggered from the flats, as well as can be overwhelmed by the massive load of snow and wind, accumulated snow during the storm, and released naturally. When we look at the definition of high danger, that means human and naturally triggered avalanches are certain. It is certain to happen. And when we're talking about avalanche terrain, we're talking about slopes that are 30 degrees and steeper, and when we're in the runouts of that, meaning we're below the start zones. So we could be in the valley floor and it could be pancake flat, but if there's a steep slope that's 30 degrees or steeper above us, it could release naturally, or we could collapse that weak layer and those dominoes could tip over, send the shock wave up the slope, and it could release remotely and come down on top of us. Let's take a look here at some satellite imagery on AspectAvy. We're going to tip it to go flat. And this is Perry's Point. This is the rough area of the slide. Because it filled back in the storm, its exact extent was unknown, but this is roughly the area of the debris pile where the victims were caught as they were headed on their way out from their hut trip. Let's zoom out for reference. Here's the Frog Lake Backcountry huts, and it's quite common to come over here over the pass and ski down and then come out. Okay, we're gonna turn on the slope shading on the satellite imagery. And let's go ahead and look at everything that's over 30 degrees. And we'll go to map to make it a little easier to see. So here's the summit of Perry's Point, and this is the site of the debris down here on the trail in the valley, the red dot trail. And we can see we've got a large amount of the slope is over 30 degrees. Now, we talked about unusual weather conditions creating unusual avalanches. It's probably very rare that this slides. And when you look at really experienced people, we just don't have that much experience with high danger days because they only happen a handful of days a year. In the past, they used to happen less frequently, but now with climate change, they happen more frequently. Historically, where we live in Crested Butte, it would be 0 to 2 days a year would be high danger, and now we're seeing more like 10 days a year of high danger. But even for the professionals or expert backcountry amateurs, we just don't have that much experience to draw on. So when we train our intuition on our information, we're not used to seeing these outlier conditions as frequently, and it's hard for us to imagine having these outlier avalanches because we just haven't seen them much in the past. And right now, the conditions are changing faster than our intuition can adapt to. Here's some simple takeaways from the accident that you can remember to keep yourself safe in the backcountry. Protocol can save our butts when our judgment and intuition fail us. So here's some simple protocols for traveling in and around avalanche terrain. And again, avalanche terrain, that's slopes that are steeper than 30 degrees and capable of producing an avalanche. And also, we want to avoid the runouts below those steep slopes above us. When we're in avalanche terrain or near avalanche terrain, we want to stay one bus length apart on the up track when we're skinning up the mountain. And then we want to ride one person at a time on the downhill. And the reason for that is there's less impact on the slope and much less likely to hit a weak point. You could think of it as a landmine on the slope. What's the protocol for high danger? Well, number one, stay out of the backcountry. It's a great day to go ski at the resort where the risk is much, much lower. And if you must go into the backcountry, well, you need to have a really keen eye for what's avalanche terrain and what's not. And you need to stay on slopes that are flatter than 30 degrees and make sure you stay out of the runouts. And that is really tricky to gauge. One kind of clear sign is if you're in old growth forest, it's highly unlikely that an avalanche will hit you there. It's not a guarantee, but it is very low probability. As a mountain guide, when I'm going into new terrain or terrain that I know very well, I want to check out the risk for the day's avalanche conditions. And I want to screen out most of my risk before I leave the house so that when I'm cold, tired, and hungry and stressed in a storm with low visibility, I've done most of the homework before I leave the house. And that's a great way to screen out the vast majority of my risk. So when I'm using a tool that helps me gauge the risk for the day's unique avalanche conditions, I can cycle through all the different danger levels and find out what terrain is going to be low risk for what avalanche dangers. And so I can model it at low danger and say, oh yeah, we can go ride these slopes when the conditions are right. Or at considerable or high danger, okay, we're really constricted on where we can go. That's going to still be low risk, and we need to take into account that we could also be in the run-out zones. So I'd encourage you to spend a lot of time tour planning to screen out as much risk as you can before you leave the house. Hopefully this has been helpful for you to take a look at terrain and the considerations that run through a guide's head on how to analyze risk in the backcountry and give you some practical tools to keep you safe. There's a few simple protocols that you can lean on so that if you make a mistake, you've got some extra buffer to help keep you alive in the backcountry, because we want all our friends and family to come home safely each tour and have a long and adventurous life in the backcountry. Thanks for watching.